Welcome to the UST Education recorded webinar series. This session is powered by US Transactions. UST is a boutique payment processing firm providing you with personalized service. We offer agnostic, best fit technology solutions for associations, nonprofits, and enterprise clients.
All right. So I'm Xavier Gassier, Director of Operations at my organization called the St. Louis chapter of the National Electrical Contractors Association. I've been with this organization for about 3 years. Prior to that, I worked with Ray at the Plumbing Industry Council and Missouri Association of Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling Contractors, representing plumbing and heating and cooling contractors throughout the state of Missouri. Prior to that, I actually came from a totally different field. My degree is in engineering, mechanical engineer by degree. Worked in the defense industry for Boeing and Northrop for a number of years before pivoting into the association world.
Hi, good afternoon. Glad everybody could attend. My name is Ray Hefner. I am currently the Chief Executive Officer of an international trade association called the American Society of Concrete Contractors. We have members across the United States, Canada, Mexico, a couple in Europe, a couple in Southeast Asia. I am a career association executive. I've been doing this my entire career. Started out at the Plumbing Industry Council and the Missouri Association of Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling Contractors, local and state, and then made the transition to an international association, excuse me, a few years ago. Worked with small staff, worked with larger staffs. So I have seen this firsthand and what happens within the confines of the multi-generational workforce. I have touched every aspect of association management throughout the course of my career, and happy to share some of my knowledge today with you all.
All right.
So let's get into it. Let's talk about defining the problem of the multi-generational workforce. As we know, and as we have seen, we have the largest multi-generational workforce in the history of our workforce. It starts with our baby boomers and goes down to Gen Z. We still have some traditionalists as part of the silent generation as part of that workforce, but now we've got 5 generations working side by side, with Generation Alpha sitting on the bench getting ready to get into that workforce. The representation is uneven. We now have seen the millennials outpace the other groups in the workforce. Effective 2016, millennials became the largest part of the workforce, followed by the baby boomers and Gen Z. This is not temporary. This is ongoing. We will see this for decades to come. The baby boomers will start to phase out, but as it sits right now, we all have to learn to work together. When you have this type of environment, you're gonna see friction from the older seasoned people down to the younger members of our workforce. But the friction doesn't mean that we're going to fail. It just means we have to address it and how we capture that moving forward.
All right. So, I think it helps. This first couple slides are kind of just setting the framework in front of us. And one of the things I do like to kind of highlight is the rate of change of adoption of kind of life-altering technologies. This, I think, unsurprising to pretty much anyone on this call, has accelerated over time. Key thing to keep in mind is that whenever we look generations prior, it could take more than one generation for a life-altering technology, electricity, refrigerators, telephones, to kind of become ubiquitous in everyday life. And really, that kind of stayed pretty constant. Anybody that's kind of millennial, elder millennial especially, I can speak for myself. My youngest part of my childhood was not all that far removed from my parents, who are Gen X, older Gen X and younger boomer. We had very similar experiences growing up, but by the time I have two sisters, one that's 5 years younger, she has a pretty different experience. And by the time 10 years for my youngest sister came to be, totally different world. Um, in that period of time, internet went from being novel or non-existent for most people to being common in that kind of 5 year window. And then 10 years later, it was taking over the world. And that pace is only going to continue. We're seeing that all the time. We saw how quickly it took for cell phones to kind of become the mainstay of our lives. And we're seeing right now how much AI is transforming our lives and how quickly it is poised to kind of take over our workplace. Ray, I know you've got some experiences seeing technology evolve in the workplace.
Yeah, kind of crazy. When I started my career as a youngster in high school, technology was just starting to evolve. I worked for a large downtown law firm in St. Louis, and we had a mail copy room that took up half a floor in a downtown office building. You know what today would be replaced by email. We had 14 people working in a mailroom, delivering interoffice mail, sorting the mail, copy machines the size of a small baseball stadium, to the evolution of the first telecopiers, which were then replaced by faxes. But what we saw is that technology emerged, was especially with the older lawyers, they weren't comfortable with filing a motion or filing a brief via the then telecopier, and of course replaced by fax. They still wanted it to be walked up to the courthouse. So as things changed and they saw the value, we saw the older, more seasoned lawyers look at the younger lawyers and see them save time, and it changed the face of how the law firm worked. But those were small technological advances compared to what we have today. But back in those days, big advances.
Yeah, and that's kind of key. We're seeing these pressures occur over time. What was once, to Ray's point, not just a department, but a small city. It was not uncommon for corporations to operate their own post office, in effect. Those roles that took a team of people to complete, and not all that far removed from today, are now, those are menial tasks for an entry-level employee to manage copies, emails, distributions, et cetera. And that trend's going to continue. I think we've all kind of seen a similar chart to what you're seeing on this slide, which is demonstrating the disconnect between productivity and compensation over time. And there are competing interests and pressures there, obviously. Pressure for productivity to increase is ever present. We always have to find ways to perform better. In the same way, there's always pressure downwards on compensation. The challenge is always, how can you do more with less? And that is that net opposing pressure on productivity and wages. That's a challenge that I think we all face in our day-to-day life, and it feeds into a lot of the challenges we see working intergenerationally. With that, first question for the group, would love to know what generational challenge is most prominent in your organization. We'll give you a minute or two to throw your answer down in chat. Okay, looks like we got a lot of A through C and a little bit of D and E and all of the above. So I think that's a pretty reasonable expectation that that's going to be the feeling from this group. We brief on this one. Just as we kind of mentioned with AI, one of the biggest challenges or opportunities at the same time is the rate of information growth. Just as everything else is growing over time, the amount of information available to us that we can employ grows over time, which is fantastic. But it's a challenge to go and deploy that technology. And those that can deploy that technology or that data more quickly are going to have kind of an edge. In the same way that more data is available, it's also more present than it's ever been before. If you were to look back through time, even if data existed, it was difficult to get. You're looking books, papers, that sort of thing. Whereas now it's instantaneous, and the more instantaneous it can be, the better. That's the whole reason we're seeing the big influx of data centers exist throughout the country, because everyone's trying to compete on how can they make that data more real time. It's a challenge we've got to keep kind of in the back of our mind. We have to figure out how to manage the amount of information available to us in the most economically profitable way. But that also kind of leads into how do we treat our people and how do we use that to our advantage in developing their careers, both early and late. Ray, would you like to talk a little bit about crystallized and fluid intelligence and how that kind of plays into this?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. So we've got two kinds of intelligence. You have fluid intelligence. What is it? Fluid intelligence is the ability to work quickly, solve new problems, recognize patterns, and adapt to unfamiliar situations. And fluid intelligence is highest when you're younger. You'll see that start to decline as you age. And then crystallized intelligence is the knowledge, the skills, the vocabulary, and everything that you accumulate over time. It's your expertise. It's the facts that you've gained, the experience, the judgments that you've made. It's kind of your stored knowledge, whereas fluid intelligence is your raw thinking ability and your ability to solve things quickly. And again, as you age, that fluid intelligence will start to wane while your crystallized intelligence starts to grow, and vice versa. And what we see that, and how we see that in the workplace is younger people will look at the more seasoned folks and say you're stuck in the past, while the older, more seasoned folks will look at the younger people and say, hey, you don't have the experience that I have to make this decision. You don't see the risks involved. So looking at both those two pieces, there's just a difference between the generations from boomers down to Gen Z on how they work through their intelligent prospects.
Yeah, and that's kind of key, and that's where this presentations might be a little bit different. If you've sat through similar presentations, we're going to take a little bit of a different approach here. That is a tremendous opportunity. I mean, obviously, it sounds a little scary of, I don't know anything when I'm young, and when I'm old, I won't be able to think anymore, kind of dramatized. But the key is identifying that opportunity and how do we leverage that, and kind of looking from an almost economic perspective, because Ray and I both work in the construction association world. And when you start talking soft skills and delicate nature, that is not the language they speak. They speak dollars and cents. So I think a perspective that comes from that dollars and cents world is helpful for establishing a framework to understand that this is economic benefit that has tremendous human resources benefits at the same time. So there are two kind of key opportunities you can realize from that difference in intelligence. The first is traditional mentorship. This is where you're taking someone that has a high level of crystallized intelligence. They have great nuanced understanding of the challenges that they're likely to encounter in the job, and how to navigate those effectively, particularly around things like politics, whether it's internal, external, not politics as in elections, but just your traditional organizational politics. So most people are kind of familiar with how traditional mentorship operates. We've kind of given you an idea of how this looks in a dollars and cents perspective. Time and career down at the bottom, x-axis of that graph, and then productive value, that's kind of the y-axis. So when you're young and new in your career, you're basically just absorbing information. You're not necessarily productive for your organization. You're not providing a net return at that very initial stage. You're in that quote unquote unprofitable employment red area. Every organization's goal is to get you out of that area as quickly as possible so they can start realizing real value, net value out of you as an employee. If you have that no knowledge transfer, that kind of blue curve on the bottom, you're kind of having fits and starts and figuring it out on your own. There's a lot of challenges. You're spending a lot of time figuring out how to be productive in that environment. Traditional mentorship simply lifts you up by leveraging someone's crystallized intelligence to shortcut that process of learning. You become productive in less time. But since they've also got a lot of insight that's difficult for one person to find on their own, they can accelerate that process and give you kind of a leap up and above what would normally be possible. At the same time, what's less commonly encountered is reverse mentorship. And this is where you're taking someone that has that high fluid intelligence and leveraging that with someone that's more experienced to kind of give them an uplift, new perspectives, adapt to new technologies and changes in the marketplace more quickly. That gives them not only more productivity in their own careers, but it also kind of key, you look over on the right, that reverse mentorship uplift is critical. That is extending the time that someone is productive in their role, valuable to your organization. And in today's world where we're seeing generations work longer and longer and longer in the workplace, that is key to allowing someone to finish out their career where they've started. That is a value to you and to the individual. We've kind of hit on these items already. Again, the key thing here is to understand that this development is beneficial to both parties. You've got an investment into these employees. They've got investments into you. By finding ways to have them develop more skills, more value for your organization, it not only makes them more valuable to themselves, but also to your group. But it also extends their career, presents opportunities that would not otherwise exist. With that, kind of giving you the background and maybe a different perspective of why. With that, we can tell you all of the what and why. How is really the critical question. So we wanted to give you some guidelines from our own experience because we've both lived this through our careers separately, but also in our careers together. First thing and most critical, in my opinion, is leading by example. Anytime you're going to try to create a culture shift to affect these forms of mentorship, you're going to get scrutinized. That's going to be challenged by everyone within your organization, top to bottom. And they're going to be testing and measuring, is this a real initiative? Is the organization really invested in developing my skills in the short time, getting me up to becoming a productive employee? But also, if I'm a seasoned employee and I'm supposed to be mentoring these younger individuals, are they invested in the length of my career, or are they going to try to push me out the door? So critically, you've got to make sure that everyone in a leadership role is bought in to this process, any change that you try to affect. And bought in really kind of is a key term because dollars and cents might very well be a piece of that. Because celebrating execution is how you go and actually affect that change. We're all familiar with SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-based. I think we've all encountered those before. The key thing that's often missed is that just like we have SMART goals, SMART objectives, we need to have SMART rewards. We need to make sure that the rewards that we are providing are timed, they are relevant, and they are measured, and specifically that they are relevant to what has been done. So some examples of that. What you want to do when you're trying to encourage people to engage in this knowledge transfer is recognize where you've had successes kind of tied to that. So recognizing cases where a learned experience has solved a problem easily. These are kind of easier to identify. This is where you would have someone that's more experienced, high crystallized intelligence, coaching someone who's new to the organization on how to solve a problem, finding cases where they've gone and solved problems independently because that knowledge transfer, traditional mentorship has occurred. You want to make sure you're recognizing that because that is showing those that are new to your organization that you are invested and recognize the value that they're bringing to the table as they get skilled up. You're incentivizing them to go and reach out and capture as much of this crystallized intelligence as possible. And in the same vein, you need to make sure that whenever you've got someone that's new to the organization, tied with someone that is high in crystallized intelligence, experienced, and they are transferring new skills. And in today's world, that can be how do you appropriately use AI? How do I do some prompt engineering? Traditionally, that might have been how do I more effectively use an Excel, Outlook, whatever tools you might have in your toolbox. Whenever someone that's new to the organization helps someone that's experienced learn and adapt to that tool and become more productive, more effective with it, you need to recognize that as well. And once more, that is showing to someone that's young in their career that, yes, we are committed to you throughout the process. We are committed to making sure you're developing skills throughout your career. And we're committed to recognizing the value that you're bringing not only to the organization, but to your fellow worker. And that's kind of key. You're building community at the same time you're building your organization. Again, that's the most important part as you go through this reward process is finding where knowledge transfer has occurred, emphasizing and celebrating that fact. And celebrations don't have to be big, but they need to be visible. You need to make sure that everyone on the team, top to bottom, is seeing this recognition. Promoting mutual respect and understanding is critical. Fostering an environment of why, it needs to be a principled approach, explaining the principles of why things are done the way they are done, and getting away from some of these, older, unprincipled positional arguments. That's how it's always been done, or you have to change, this is the new way. Ray, I know you've had some recent experiences where this has come into play and where you found some value.
Yeah, we really have. One of the things that we recently did is we published a history book of the American Society of Concrete Contractors. It was done by two of our most seasoned people within the association, traditionalists, part of the silent generation, and they physically wanted to publish a book. And you can imagine the blowback that you would get from the emerging leaders and the younger folks as to, hey, this is a book. We're never going to read it. It doesn't make sense to us. So we got the two groups together, the emerging leaders and something we call the legacy committee, to discuss what we could do and get some success out of a published hard copy book. And with the help of the emerging leaders, they convinced our legacy group that it would make sense that if we want to get people to look at this, we need to put it on platforms that the younger generations are used to using, whether it be podcast, whether it be Kindle, but platforms that people are used to using in today's technological world. So what we agreed to do between the legacy committee and the emerging leaders was just that. We put the book into podcast form, chapter by chapter. You can get it on Apple, you can get it on Kindle, you can see it on our YouTube channel. And we've actually seen the viewership of that book grow. We sold about 50 copies initially, and we're up to about 410 views on our YouTube channel for that particular book and podcast, chapter by chapter. And the thought process behind that from the emerging leaders was, look, we don't have time to sit down and read the book, but we can take quick 10-minute hits chapter by chapter. So we saw a real uptick in that, and we were able to retain that institutional knowledge, that crystallized knowledge that we might have lost otherwise.
With that, second question for the group, does your organization currently have a formal mentorship program? And if so, what form? I'll give you a few minutes to give your answers. Okay. Seeing a lot of D's, which is no mentorship program, a number of A's, which is your traditional mentorship program, but only one B for bi-directional. Also interesting to see that you've got somewhere you've got limited scope in your mentorship programs. That's interesting. Yeah. So kind of in that vein, implementing formal mentorship programs is kind of critical, right? You want to talk about some of the mentorship programs you put in place?
Yeah, some of the things that we've done, as I alluded to, we established a legacy committee for that crystallized intelligence, and an emerging leaders committee for the fluid intelligence side. But one of the things that we've done very recently that we've seen that's been very effective is that we used to do our new member board orientation by one of the C-suite people, typically the membership director, or even by myself. But in order to get some really good knowledge transfer from the seasoned folks to the emerging leaders, and again, vice versa, we've asked our senior board members to mentor our newer board members on things that they may have not been familiar with. Most of our board members are either owners or C-suite people, but have had limited knowledge in the association world. They may not be familiar with why we file 990s, what parliamentary procedure looks like inside of meetings, governance issues inside the associations. They may not have to read profit and loss statements, which are part of their fiduciary responsibility. And what we've seen is that our emerging leaders are really grasping and taking a hold of that crystallized knowledge that these board members have experienced over their career. Many people on the board have been there for 10, 12, 14 years, and they've had a lot of complex issues to address during the changing times, including a complete realignment of staff. And there's been some really good suggestions from the newer emerging leader board members on how to find new staff and engage new technology when looking for staff. I most recently had to hire 2 new staff people, and my then executive committee, very seasoned at the time, really thought that we were going to put an ad in the newspaper. I'm not even sure where newspapers are published, but of course we didn't go down that road. And I've got 2 very young millennials who suggested and teamed with me. No, we're going to use the technology that's available now through Indeed, through our professional associations, through LinkedIn and our social media platforms to attract new employees. And at the end of the day, very, very, very effective. And the seasoned board members saw how effective it was and implemented some of that in their own companies. So you had a little traditional mentorship and reverse mentorship, and that bi-directional piece worked very well for us in real world.
Yeah, and I think this is where Ray and I can both speak to our own personal experiences, actually. So as I mentioned kind of in my introduction, that Ray and I worked together, and I came from a totally unrelated field, though not new to the working world, had no experience in association management whatsoever. Whenever I came into the organization, Ray was very proactive in establishing that mentorship, and that was a tremendous value to me to come up to speed, because as we all know, the association world is rife with pitfalls, and the difference between success and some pretty bad failure can be incredibly narrow. Ray's experience throughout the industry for a number of years was tremendous insight for me in how to become effective in the shortest period of time possible. Again, trying to navigate what I think most of us understand to be a potentially precarious, if not thorny, world. So, in that sense, traditional mentorship was incredibly invaluable to me to add value to the group and to my own personal career development. But, I think we set up a bi-directional mentorship kind of out the gate. And Ray, do you want to share some of your experiences with that?
Yeah, super important. And old dogs can learn new tricks, and they might not want to at the get-go. But some of the things that Zave and I did with the reverse mentorship were more valuable to me than my 4 years of college and 2 years of grad school. When Zave came in, and he came in from outside the association industry, and as an engineer, he brought with him lean management principles, which were invaluable to our groups at the time. As many of you know, trade associations can be very big, very cumbersome, multiple committees, large boards of directors. And through those lean management principles, we were able to streamline our groups and take a 22-person board down to 11 and take a 12-person board down to 7, which absolutely impacted the way we made decisions moving forward. And it also allowed us to streamline the association from a financial standpoint. Now, on a personal standpoint, Zay brought a lot of great tools for me as I did my job. I will tell you, he brought something called work clustering, which I had not done before. And if you're not familiar with work clustering, you cluster like projects together and get them done at one time until they are done, so there is no interruption. Also brought with him zero-based email. I don't know how many of you go throughout your day answering emails and having conversations, but when you have a zero-based email approach, you look at your emails in the morning, prioritize them, answer what needs to be answered, and put the rest on the back burner till the next day, check again late in the afternoon, same process. That way you're not having conversations throughout the day. So what Zaid brought to my table was invaluable for my career moving forward. So I don't get caught up in some of the things that you used to get caught up with, particularly emails and, oh, I've got to answer a legislator, and then I've got to look at the financials. You cluster all those together so that you don't lose focus and can concentrate on end result.
Yeah. So, I think that's why Ray and I love giving this particular presentation, because we've both seen real world value and have as much as you possibly could lived it. And I feel comfortable saying that both of us in the career steps we made subsequent to our last organization have been direct products of that mentorship and reverse mentorship process. With that, a couple more tips. As you establish a formal mentorship program, and there's a lot of flexibility in what those can look like, and they really do need to be tailored to your specific culture and environment. But one kind of critical piece that's often missed throughout that establishment is layering, in effect. One of the challenges you'll encounter is you can find a great mentor for one specific aspect of someone's job, but someone who's great at how to craft an email might not be very handy at an Excel spreadsheet, giving incredibly simplistic examples. But the key there is identifying potentially multiple mentors. So you're ensuring that you're developing the whole of someone's skill set. And again, same thing for reverse mentorship, making sure that someone that's experienced is paired with multiple new people in different avenues. So they're also getting brought up to speed and building skills in a variety of different areas. You're trying to prevent fall through. You want to make sure that someone doesn't develop one single skill and then fall off in all other areas, and then wind up in the same place or worse than they would have been otherwise. Alongside that, while formal mentorship is important, you can also add informal aspects. And one that's pretty commonly used, and I do like to see it used pretty often, is basically a buddy mentor. That's where you pick someone that is certainly further along in their career, but you want them to be much closer to the individual that's doing the mentorship. And, I said early in their career, that's for someone that's new, but same thing for someone that's further in their career. Finding someone that is as like as you can get to basically be a buddy. And again, critical in the earlier stages. The point of this person is not necessarily to do as much skills transfer. It's to kind of take care of and develop comfort around some of those smaller friction points that might occur. It's making them feel more comfortable in the organization, building more of a team aspect around it. It's all about lowering barriers, because that's the number one thing you encounter with mentorship programs. Even if you get a formal mentorship program put together, there are a lot of interpersonal barriers that are put up. Finding avenues to lower those barriers is critical to getting as much success as you can get as quickly as possible. How you can do that in kind of a day-to-day, very low cost, low time, low risk way. Facilitating knowledge sharing sessions. This is an easy way if you want to do a little bit more of an informal approach. And knowledge sharing sessions are just things like lunch and learn, staff meetings. They can be pairing one-to-one on unique projects or problems. The key thing is these should be kind of tasks that are already going on, or events or meetings that are already occurring. And you're kind of piggybacking on whatever that topic might be. So for a lunch and learn, I'll give an example we've held here in the office. We had a number of phishing attempts through our email, a couple phone call phishing attempts as well. And we realized that a lot of staff weren't familiar with what phishing attempts were, how to navigate them, how to report them. So we just did a brief lunch and learn where we had someone on the team kind of teach everybody else in the group how to identify these, how to navigate them if you're unsure, who to contact. Again, it was not a high cost. It was not a high risk. It was as easy as could be. It was a team meeting that we already had occurring. We had someone who had some domain knowledge. They shared it with the group. And it's great because that's kind of establishing a bilateral relationship in terms of competency networking. You're letting people demonstrate the skills they have to the group, but also allowing them to be a resource for others and demonstrate to others how they can identify the correct resources. So obviously, there are direct organizational benefits. We're having less susceptibility to phishing attempts, but the networking aspect is also vital. And again, you're building skills in people that would not otherwise encounter them, making them more valuable, not only within their jobs, but to themselves, because that's a great example of something that you're going to encounter in your day-to-day life. We're all going to get phishing attempts to our own home phones and emails. So once more, this is just an easy way to implement. You're just adding on a little piece to something that's already occurring, identifying skills that someone has that are not common within your group and allowing them to get those out in front of the group. This is especially powerful with people who are newer to your organization. Someone who's more seasoned might feel that everyone should already know what they know. But someone who's new and hasn't had an avenue to kind of strut their stuff, this is a great way to say, oh, so-and-so has this fantastic knowledge of an Excel trick, get it out in front of the group. You're building that rapport, you're transferring value and knowledge, and you're facilitating the process of a more formal mentorship program. Operational changes, providing training and development opportunities, same kind of thing. These can be formal, they can be classes that you're sending people to demonstrate financial commitment, but they can be relatively low cost, potentially high return on investment. One of the things I like to do, we've done in our own organization, is self-direction and performance-tied structure. So we had basically a amount set aside for a bonus to our staff for going and identifying a personal development opportunity, going and achieving that. They would then go and receive that bonus. So that's an easy way to encourage someone to kind of go and do a little bit of self-help. Embracing technology as a learning tool and bridge. That's one of your biggest divides you're going to see between generations. And newer people are generally much better at navigating the new technologies that are emerging in our industry. So that's a great way, again, to facilitate some of that more difficult to start reverse mentorship. And again, the growing digital work environments, I imagine a number of you are hybrid, if not virtual only. So that developing those skills is kind of critical, not only for yourselves, but also for your own members or potentially consultants outside that you might want to bring in-house. Ray, do you want to speak to some operational changes you've made?
Yeah, we made a number of operational changes that have been relatively low cost, but we've had some blowback, and this is going to sound crazy in today's world. When I came into my current group, we still operated a fax machine, and when I put the notification out to the membership that we were going to eliminate that fax machine, I had six members contact the office, contact my membership director, saying we can't get rid of the fax machine. Well, that was 6 members out of just over 1,000, and we said, well, if you can't get away from using the fax machine and you can't attach a file into your email, maybe you should not be doing business. And we said that tongue in cheek, but what we ended up doing for those 6 members was we taught them how to attach files to their email, how to use a secure portal within our website to send that information to us. And although it sounds small, it was a big deal to our group. Many of our members were very concerned about sending credit card information, sending copies of checks with routing numbers and account information to the secure portal. They felt comfortable using the fax, but not using today's technology. now. That's been a number of years since then, and the buy-in has been almost 100% now. We've gotten away from paper billing. We're doing everything digitally, so it goes to our members' desk. They can sit at their desk and pay it online. I took a call, in fact, yesterday from one of my members who said, "Hey, I didn't see the link to pay my membership dues. Can you send it to me?" And I said, "Sure." He goes, "I can't tell you how much time it saves me just to be able to do it from my desk. I don't have to send it to accounting and then sign off on it." So small incremental changes for us have made a big deal, and that's just a couple.
Thank you, Ray, for sharing that experience. So as you execute this change, again, giving you some kind of guidelines for greater success. These are basically, how do you kind of short circuit some of the challenges you're going to encounter? One thing that you often see whenever someone tries to develop these training opportunities and mentorship opportunities is they try to address all of their weaknesses. Oh, we're not good at this. We're not good at that. Let's shore up all of those before we move forwards. Unfortunately, the time and cost associated with that is often prohibitive, and you're often much better leaning into kind of what you are really good at, and staying away from shoring up the worst of the weaknesses. Now, obviously, if you've got weaknesses where people aren't talking to each other, there comes a level where you do have to address weaknesses, but often leveraging your strengths is a much greater asset. But really, the one I like to hit on is don't stack the deck against yourself. When you're establishing these sorts of things, there's nobody that's going to come in and say your mentorship program can or can't look like this, assuming you're not mentoring people on how to commit crime. So, know and understand that you have as much flexibility to tailor mentorship to fit your group as you'd like. So don't stack the deck against yourself. Structure your programs, whether that's training and education or whether that's mentorship, to really suit the ways that work best for you. If you've got a very gregarious and outgoing, very experienced person, by all means, make them a mentor for 5 people. Don't tie them to just a one-on-one mentorship program. But if you've got someone that finds a lot of difficulty working in that sort of environment with multiple people, at the same time, you wouldn't want to force them to have to take on dozens of mentors or mentees. So you have to identify, where do your strengths lie and how you best leverage them. And that's a lot of doing a survey, kind of your own internal resources, your human resources, human capital is really how you kind of affect what's going to stack the deck in your favor the best way possible. And remember, there's universal expectations. People want to feel secure in their income, want to be clear about their future. They want to have defined responsibilities. I think given time, we'll probably leave this one off and step into true compensation. Ray, you've got a really good example of where getting away from just pure dollars and cents thinking, and understanding the generational needs, differences in generational needs can really be powerful in a staffing opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Absolutely do. Had to hire a couple new staff people over the last 14 months. And what I have found in hiring these staff people, one is a Gen Z and one is millennial. They are more concerned, and this is firsthand real world experience. They are very concerned about the job that they're doing and where they do it from. More than willing to trade dollars and cents on salary for the ability to work from home one day a week, for the ability to elevate their skills through training and development. So, this was not a typical compensation package where they were just worried about what are my dollars and cents. They're very interested in, hey, do you offer employer paid medical, dental, vision? Is there a 401k? What type of tuition reimbursement programs do you have if I wanted to go on and get a master's degree? So that traditional sense of compensation got put out the back door, and I was able to structure packages that were not focused primarily on salary, but focused on the needs, the wants, the desires of those two persons coming in on staff. What is my ability to move up? How am I going to grow? So we have to take all of those things into consideration when we're looking at allocating resources to staff people, and it far exceeds just looking at the traditional salary piece of a package.
It's a great example of where generational changes, because that's not necessarily the expectation that would have occurred generations previously. With that, we'd love to know what generational challenge is most prominent in your organization. Is it pay, flexibility, culture, career path, leadership quality? If it's something else, by all means, please add that into the comments. Thank you. Okay, interesting responses. Seeing a lot of C and D, some E's. Interestingly, only saw one A, which I think probably reflects, I'm going to assume, a little bit of a younger generation in a lot of these workplaces. I am intrigued by that comment that, and this is a common thing, and it's a great example of buy-in about the rigidity around utilizing flexibility. That's a great example of where the buy-in from the organization to what they claim to offer is really critical, because if you're offering flexibility as a key part of your compensation and not delivering, that can be a pretty significant divide. With that, I think that just kind of closes the book nicely on getting away from that classical model of compensation. And I think this group kind of already has, which is that traditional, what's my wage, what's my title, where am I going to be, what are my benefits, and looking more holistically into what flexibility exists, what social cachet might be there, what's the work environment, what are my opportunities, responsibilities. It's very multidimensional. So it's actually refreshing to see that there's a lot of multidimensionality in the responses we're seeing here. But this is, uncommon, I would say. It's much more common, particularly where you run into organizations that have a lot of more experience and seasoned folks, that wage and title tends to dominate a lot of that conversation. So again, that's one instance of where tailoring how you're approaching a problem based on what your audience looks like, because you wouldn't, if you're going to offer social cachet to someone that just cares about dollars and cents, you're going to miss the boat pretty significantly. But vice versa, if you're going to focus only on wages for someone who cares tremendously about flexibility, you're not matching and pairing value to one another. With that, I think we're out of time, and we've got one closing discussion item, if you would like to answer, which is if you could implement one structural change tomorrow to better leverage generational strengths, what would it be? Okay. Like some good answers, a lot of bi-directional mentorship, which is positive. Improved communication, always a challenge. Flexible work arrangements, seeing that come up a few times. So great responses, and I appreciate your feedback and your time. I think Ray and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Riley, do you have to get anything else out before we wrap up?
You have a couple minutes for questions, so definitely if there's anything that the attendees are wanting to ask, I would go ahead and encourage them to put that in the chat now.
And we'll go ahead and put our link to our website into chat. If you have any questions or want to reach out to us offline, please feel free to do so. Happy to assist. All right, Riley, we'll turn it back over to you.